The wrench slammed against the deck with a thunderous clang that silenced an entire hangar filled with alien eyes. A 7-foot Valori pilot laughed, his recorder live to millions, certain the human mechanic before him would cower. But Benjamin O'Keefe did not flinch. Not when solvent splashed across the memorial plaque bearing his son's name. Not when arrogance mocked sacrifice. In that instant, a quiet man with grease-stained coveralls was about to teach a galaxy what true honor looks like. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. Outpost Aurora was a lighthouse of steel and glass, and Hangar 12 felt like its quiet chapel. Overhead, beams vanished into shadow. Underfoot, deck plating hummed with a careful heartbeat. It was Memorial Week, the time each year when the station slowed its voice and polished its memory. Benjamin O'Keefe, called Ben by anyone who had ever borrowed a wrench from him, moved along the curve of a vintage Terran fighter. He wore sun-faded coveralls and safety goggles that had seen more dawns than most cadets. Every pull of his cloth was steady. Every pause around the memorial plate was a small promise kept. His back patch read, almost rubbed away, "We keep them flying." On the observation level, crowds pressed to the clear rail. Dozens of species breathed a hush into the recycled air. Among them stood Envoy Raul Vorun and his mate Sira, Valori dignitaries whose robes whispered court money, private decks, and perfect timing. Their sun towered between them. Dravik Vorun, fresh flight school medal, threaded along the seams of his silver suit. His crest scales shimmered with a showy confidence that asked for an audience. "Outdated craft," Dravik said in his own language, letting the translator carry every syllable. Romance painted on rust. A few heads turned. A Riellan elder tightened her shawl. An Earth veteran in a burgundy cap folded her hands and refused to look away. Dravik lifted a hollow streamer, its lens sipping light with hungry grace. "Let's show the grid how humans worship old panels," he said. His mouth curved. The device began to stream. Ben didn't look up. He dipped the cloth. He traced a name with 2 fingers. He took a breath, slow as a docking sequence. The canister came like a small meteor, silver, half empty, pitched with strength that belonged in combat sims, not memorial halls. It struck the deck near the plate, burst, and spread violet solvent along the floor, and worst of all, over the etched names. Drops ran like bruised rain across letters that had outlived the hands that once wrote them. Sound thinned. Even the tool carts seemed to hold still. A patch of liquid quivered on a single name, Liam O'Keefe. Ben stared at that line. His shoulders settled in a way that said he had been here before, in 1,000 quiet hours, and in one loud hour that had broken every other hour. He set down the cloth, picked up his wrench, stepped forward, and in one motion that looked like a sketch of thunder, he brought the wrench down on the hollow streamer. The device fell apart with the fragile pride of a soap bubble. 14 glittering pieces skated across the deck. The live feed died to black, and with it died the chorus of easy laughs that had begun to flare in distant rooms. "My recorder," Dravik said, shock dropping his posture a full inch. "That's a restricted model, you." Ben was already kneeling at the memorial plate. He was not fast, not theatrical. He was exact. He cleaned the first name, then the next, each stroke a careful apology to the patient metal. Violet faded to a faint sheen, then to nothing. Security boots approached from the side gate. Commander Nandi Okoro, tall and calm, arrived with a hand resting close to her stun baton and gaze resting firmly on the facts. She took in solvent, shards, crowd, and Ben's steady movements. Envoy Rahl's voice carried like a memo that expected to be obeyed. "This man attacked my son's property, and your son," Nandi said, "threw hazardous fluid at a protected memorial. We enforce quiet laws here, Envoy, and the quiet laws matter most." Sira shifted, 6 fingers twining. "He is young." The veteran in the burgundy cap finally spoke, as if she had been drafting a message in her chest. "Young were the pilots who gave these names," she said. "We were older only because we lived." Dravik looked from her to Ben. He noticed, for the first time, the Tyree engraved mark beside one name, a small star, barely there, next to Liam O'Keefe. His crest scales cooled a shade. Ben's voice came like stone warmed by sun. "Commander, I want no charges. The plate needs care more than the boy needs punishment. If there must be a lesson, let it be learned here, with a cloth and time." Nandi studied Ben's profile and saw a man who had learned to breathe inside grief without letting it race. She nodded once. "There will be a conversation," she said. "Not in public, not in anger, and not without witnesses who remember." She signaled her team. The Vorowins were guided toward a conference room whose walls knew stories. The crowd slowly exhaled. Someone passed Ben a fresh cloth. A young cadet whispered, "Sir, do you need help?" Ben smiled in the way that happens mostly in the eyes. "We all do," he said. "Today, the plate does." And while the station turned on its axis, and the stars kept their long, quiet watch, Hangar 12 kept a shorter watch, over a man kneeling, a name uncovered, and a pilot who had come to make a show and had walked into a lesson instead. The conference chamber was modest, with windows that framed docking lights like careful fireflies. On one wall, a timeline flickered. Battles fought, treaties signed, ships retired. The kind of room where voices are asked to tell the whole truth, even when it is uncomfortable. Marin Taylor, station administrator, set a carafe of water on the table and sat across from the Voruns. Dr. Amina Farley, counselor and historian, stood near the holo controls. Commander Nandi Okoro took the corner seat that leaders choose when they want to watch doors and hearts at the same time. Envoy Rahl began. "We will, of course, pay for the damage." "This is not an invoice meeting," Marin said, her tone soft, practical, and unmoved. "This is a community meeting. What was touched today was not a surface. It was a promise." Sira's fingers tightened into a knit of worry. "Our son meant mischief, not harm." Dravik stared at the table where the grain ran in patient lines. "I wanted to entertain," he said, a little hoarse. "The grid likes bold clips." Dr. Amina turned on the holo. "Not battle footage. Not yet." First came photos of mechanics in plain shirts, pilots in crooked smiles, families at station picnics, a corner of a bench where initials had been carved and later sanded smooth. "This," she said, "is what the plate holds. Not glory, not propaganda. Wait." The next holotile opened on a map of the Oran Gate conflict. 15 years passed. A single old fighter, Hellcat 17, circled in orange. Dravik shifted when the ID tag flashed. "Liam O'Keefe. You met his father, kneeling insolvent," Dr. Amina said. "You did not meet Liam. He wasn't a hero who craved an audience. He was a young pilot who learned old engines, wrote messages home, and told a bad joke over comms when the room needed a laugh." Nandi leaned forward. "We have choices now," she said. "Press charges formally, which would end with labor far from stars, or offer something both harder and kinder. 6 weeks of service, under the man whose son's name you blurred. You will wake before artificial dawn and leave after the shift whistle. You will learn tools, safety, and story. and you will make every panel shine." Dravik looked at his father. The envoy's jaw clenched. His mother's eyes shone, whether with anger or fear. Dravik couldn't tell. "We accept," Sira said quietly, surprising the room. "Our son must learn the station's language." Marin nodded. "Good. Tomorrow at 600. Wear clothes you can stain and shoes that grip." The first morning tasted like metal and mint in Dravik's mouth. Hangar air is always a bit sweet from coolants, a bit bitter from burned drive dust. Ben met in with a nod and a toolkit. "You'll be awkward at first," Ben said, handing him magnetic boots sized for his long feet. "Awkward is honest. Honest is good." Dravik stepped onto the deck. Every motion felt 2 beats late. He reached for a spanner with 4 fingers and found, to his surprise, that human tools expect 5, and they do not argue kindly. Ben showed him how to stand, how to brace, how to check the hiss of a seal with his ear, not his eyes. "Gloves," Ben said, "not because you are fragile, because respect wears gloves." The first hour was all dropping. Sockets, a small ring that slid under a console and vanished like a coin in a storm drain. Dravik laughed once, short and embarrassed. "The floor eats," Ben said. "We feed it less if we kneel." At midday, Dr. Amina arrived with a veteran named Mikkel Ray, a former engineer whose legs were polished steel built after a breach took the original pair. Mikkel spoke about threshold moments when a circuit either holds or breaks. "Most of maintenance is listening," he said, "to metal, to people, to ourself." They all ate together on overturned crates. Ben had tea. Dravik tried a human fruit bar and found it tart enough to pull a face. Ben pretended not to notice, and then slid over a softer biscuit baked in the station's kitchen. Day 2 brought the polish cart. Dravik learned to circle his cloth, small spirals that build. "Not circles like laziness," Ben said. "Circles like care." Day 3 brought stories sharper than tools. Nurse Priya Badru told them about triage hours at the Orin Gate. "We stopped counting species," she said. "We only counted breathing." Day 4, Dravik met Judy Leong, Liam's old friend. She held a tiny bundle of fresh station blooms and set them in a cup beside the plate. "I was angry at the sky for a long time," she said, quiet and sure. "Then I decided to be useful. That was the only way to stand it." On day 5, Dravik's boots caught a groove and he went down on one knee. No one laughed. Ben offered a hand. "Everyone kneels in here," he said, sometimes on purpose. That evening, after the last tool had clicked home, Dr. Mange, Amina showed one more holo, Liam's final voice log. The young voice sounded like someone who had cleaned dishes after family dinner and remembered to feed a station cat. "Tell my dad the panel shines," Liam said, steady. "Tell him I learned it right. I love you. This is worth it." The room tasted like salt. Ben stepped away without drama, quietly, the way you leave a room when you do not want to drag others into your weather. Dravik stayed. He listened to the last seconds twice. The third time, he learned the silence after the voice by he. He did not post that night. He set his device in a drawer. He set his alarm instead. And when morning broke, and Hangar 12 opened its doors with the slow patience of big buildings, Dravik was already there, boots on, gloves waiting, ready to learn how memory becomes work. The middle weeks felt like learning a new alphabet. Ben taught Dravik letters made of torque and threads, vowels shaped like sealant beads, and punctuation tapped into rivets that pulled 2 worlds into one skin. They spoke less, they looked more. They said please and thank you to tools, and after a while, the tools began to answer. "Start with the boring checks," Ben said. "Boring saves accidents." Together, they logged temperatures of old capacitors, ran diagnostics on sensors that had outlived 3 software eras, and marked hairline cracks with a tiny wax pencil the color of moonlight. In a corner of the hangar, a small class of station kids toured with a teacher who whispered more than usual. The children fell quiet when Dravik lifted a panel with Ben. They watched an alien pilot learn human hinges. A little boy raised a hand. "Does it hurt to remember?" he asked. Ben considered. "Yes," he said, "and no. Yes, because it matters. No, because it keeps people alive inside you." During fuel line practice, Dravik's fingers learned to fight their own impatience. Rushing always made the clamp bite crooked. Slow and firm, Ben reminded. Slow and firm make seals that do not lie later. After shifts, Dravik started visiting the archive room. He asked the librarian for things not often requested. Maintenance logs from 20 years back, letters from deckhands, cafeteria menus from the week of the Oren Gate. He learned the shapes of the days around the famous day, the common hours that hold up the heavy hour. One afternoon, a veteran named Joanna Park came by with a crate of old patches. "The Concorde tried to standardize our look," she said, smiling. "We never let them. Patches tell more truth than uniforms." Dravik held one that read, "Fix first, argue later." He nodded like someone who had argued first and learned. Ben rarely spoke about Liam, but Dravik learned to notice when his hands slowed near the plate. One time, Ben ran a fingertip along the lower edge and stopped at a tiny scratch no one else would have noticed. He didn't mention it. Later, Dravik took a cotton swab and smoothing compound and made the scratch a little smaller, then left a note that simply said, "I saw it too." Ben found it and said nothing. He brought a second cup of tea the next day. By the third week, Dravik's wrist motions softened. He no longer jabbed, he persuaded. Ben nodded more often. He even told a joke about a mechanic, a pilot, and a stubborn bolt walking into a bar that had poor thread standards. It was not a very good joke, which made it perfect for Hangar 12. Dravik laughed and almost dropped a socket, then did not drop it at the last second. Both victories counted. Dr. Amina arranged a quiet gathering with a small circle of families who had lost someone at the Oren Gate. They did not talk about strategy or victories. They talked about red scarves left on bedposts, favorite soups, and letters that arrived 2 days late and still felt on time in the heart. An elder said, "Remembering is not a museum, it is a pantry. We reach for what feeds us, and we cook again." One evening, Ben took Dravik to a windowed platform where cargo ships slid like patient geese. They shared a simple meal, and Ben placed a worn cloth on the table. "Liam gave me this after his first solo polish," he said, voice steady. "Said I would need a spare someday. I never did, because he liked to tease me about my habits. I want you to have it for a while, not as a souvenir, as a reminder that hands can learn." Dravik held the cloth as if it could bruise. "I'll bring it back," he said. "You'll pass it on," Ben said. Toward the end of the 4th week, Dravik found courage to ask, "Why did you not press charges?" Ben looked at the fighter. "Because a punishment ends a day," he said. "A lesson begins one." On a late shift, they played back a section of Liam's final minutes. Not the words this time, but the quiet sounds, breathing, alert tones, the soft squeak of a glove as he adjusted a knob, tiny noises that proved someone was there, choosing and staying. Dravik went to his station bunk and could not sleep for a long time. He listed names in whispers, the way people count stars when they try to feel the size of the sky. He pressed his palm to the cloth Ben had lent him. He decided he liked the smell of metal after all. It smelled like attention. His public channels, once a steady drip of pride and performance, stayed dark. A few old friends pinged him with jokes that had once been funny. He typed, deleted, and typed again, learning how to listen. He did not press send. He pressed wake on his alarm. By the 5th week, Dravik moved like someone who expected to be trusted. Ben left him alone with checklists. When he returned, everything matched. Not perfect. Honest. Honest keeps flying. The last day of the week, an academy group toured. A young Valori cadet with a shiny crest asked Dravik, "How do you stand the boring parts?" Dravik smiled with his eyes, the way Ben did. "The boring parts are the bridge," he said. "You walk them to get to meaning. And somewhere between sealant and stories, between lifting and setting down, between wipe and polish and sigh, the hangar stopped being a place where Dravik had to prove anything. It became a place where he got to serve. Which is harder? And better. The last morning of Dravik's assignment arrived soft and gray. Hangar lights warmed up like sunrise, pretending to happen inside. Ben and Dravik stood shoulder to shoulder at the plate. The violet stain from weeks ago was a rumor now, remembered only by the few who had scrubbed with care. "You're leaving," Ben said, not as a question. "I am," Dravik answered. "But I think a part of me is staying right here, stuck under this panel with that runaway ring." He smiled. Ben smiled back. Commander Nandi arrived with Marin and Dr. Amina. The small group formed a half-circle. There were no speeches, only a short silence, a kind of standing bow to the work done and the work that still called. Dravik reached for his pocket and lifted a simple holochip. "I recorded the last 6 weeks," he said. "Not the first day, not the harm, just the learning. I want to place this in your archive for schools, not for feeds. The title is plain. What steady hands can teach. May I?" Dr. Amina accepted it with both hands. "Plain is perfect," she said. "Plain lasts." "And this," Dravik added, holding out Ben's cloth, now washed, edges mended. "I think it belongs where it can keep making meaning." Ben took the cloth, then paused. "Keep it," he said. "Or rather, borrow it longer. When you meet someone who needs it, you will know." Dravik nodded. "I will carry it until then." The farewell could have been the end. But stories that grow from memory dislike sharp endings. Dravik returned to Valora Prime and did the unglamorous thing. He turned down a prestigious fighter slot and requested assignment with maintenance units that cared for memorial craft across sectors. His father raged for 2 days and then, to his surprise, wrote a letter to Ben he never sent, which is sometimes the bravest kind of letter. The recording went not to entertainment networks, but to classroom feeds. It met resistance. Some officials said it was sentimental. The veterans answered with their own files and voices. A slow, decent tide formed. Schools added a session called Hands That Hold the Wings. New mechanics came to stations with softer boots and stronger spines. Years gathered like careful welds. Dravik's crest dulled a little, the way metals do when they have worked in the right places. He kept the cloth in his pocket until the day he handed it to a nervous apprentice and said, "Try this on a small panel first." The apprentice did, and after that spoke more gently to everything. News travels differently in places that know grief. When Ben passed, it reached Dravik while he was mid-inspection on a remote dock whose windows showed a thin silver of comet, like a scratch on space. He took leave at once and rode a small shuttle across quiet dark to Outpost Aurora. The service filled Hangar 12 with the soft sounds of goodbyes. People came who had stood next to Ben in arguments and aisles. People came whose names lived on plates he had cleaned. Dravik spoke simply. "Ben taught me that maintenance is not a lesser art," he said. "It is the art that lets every other art survive long enough to matter." After the service, Dravik stood alone beside Hellcat 17. The fighter's nose cone reflected him back in a ripple. He placed a small microcell lamp under the rim, no larger than a coin, soft as a nightlight. He wired it to a switch hidden inside the access notch, where only a mechanic's fingers would reach. When the hangar dimmed each evening, the little lamp would glow, nothing showy, a secret star for the crew. A young cadet wandered near, caught by the faint light. "Sir," she whispered, "what is it for?" "For remembering to look closely," Dravik said. "Most important things hide where only careful people will find them." The years continued their slow orbit. On Valora Prime, Dravik taught a course at the academy, not in aerial tactics, but in shared history and applied ethics for service crews. He began each term the same way. "What keeps a ship honorable?" he asked, "when no one is watching?" Students suggested rules, cameras, and reviews. Dravik shook his head and smiled. "A rag," he said, "a checklist, and someone who believes names on a plate are names in a room." Traditions spread as quietly as oil. Pilots started a custom before launch, a small salute to the maintenance bay. Crews answered with a gentle tap on the fuselage, as if thanking a bird that agreed to carry them. Stations added a minute to pre-flight briefings called the Minute of Hands, honoring the people who tighten and test so others can fly. At the 50th remembrance of the Oran Gate, Valora Prime unveiled a statue that made no one feel small. A human mechanic in simple coveralls, head slightly bowed, standing beside an old fighter. The plaque read, "To those who keep memory in working order." Dravik spoke, his tone quiet, words simple enough for children to take home. "Our future needs caretakers," he said. "Glorious moments fade if no one oils the hinges." Later that night, after the speeches and the careful applause, Dravik returned to Outpost Aurora. He walked the long path to Hangar 12. Lights dimmed on motion sensors and brightened again in welcome. He reached under Hellcat 17's nose cone and pressed the hidden switch. The small lamp bloomed. The glow was barely there. It touched the edge of the memorial plate and made the engraved letters shine as if their owners had just stepped into the room. Dravik ran a finger under one name and found a tiny line etched long ago, hard to see unless you expected love to leave a sign. The line read, "Dad, thank you for teaching me the right way to clean." On reports day, he smiled, not because it was dramatic, but because it was ordinary and good. A child, visiting late with a parent who worked nights, stopped nearby and watched the lamp. "Can a light this small really matter?" the child asked. "Only always, especially when you're the one who remembers to turn it on." He handed the child a fresh cloth from his pocket, the one he had kept safe for many years, and said, "Here, try a small panel. Circles that build." The child nodded, even without the panel. Serious as sunrise, together they polished until the faint glow caught the curve just right. It looked, for a quiet second, like the ship itself breathed. And so the station kept its patient promise, not through speeches carved in stone, not through feeds that burned hot and vanished, but through a simple habit learned by new hands from older hands. Look closer, work kindly, leave a light for the next crew. The world goes on because somebody keeps it in good repair. In the ledger of Outpost Aurora, under a new entry marked Tradition Begun, a line appeared, written by a clerk who understood stories. "Salute the hands that hold the wings." And somewhere every night, a small lamp glowed under an old nose cone, bright enough for those who know where to look. Bright enough to keep memory flying.